Okay, so now we're going to talk about when a function is increasing and decreasing and when it obtains its maximum and minimum. All right, so here's a graph of a function y equals f of x. And let's start by doing something we already know how to do. Let's find the domain of this guy, right? So it starts at -4, and we are including -4 here. And it's going to go all the way up to 4, but there's an open dot there. So that means that 4 isn't included. All right. Now, let's talk about when the graph is increasing. That means that the graph is going up. As we move in the positive x direction, the graph should be increasing. So our graph is doing that between -2 and 2. And I always use open intervals for when our graph is increasing and decreasing because sometimes it stops for a second. So I don't want to include those endpoints where I've stopped. Now, where am I decreasing? This is exactly what you would think. These are the places where our graph is going downward. So it's going downward over here and over here. So those intervals are -4 to -2, union 2 to 4. And again, I'm going to leave everything open. Next, I'm going to talk about my maximums and minimums. And I'm going to start by talking about local max. And I'm going to say my local max occurs whenever I'm at the very top. So here, this is the very top of a peak, right, at 2, 1. And then I have another maximum at -4, 2. The graph isn't defined on the other side of -4. So that's as high as we get. So we have 2 local maxima. One at -4, 2, and another at 2, 4, or 2, 1. Next, let's talk about local minima. All right, and one happens at -2, -2. And that's actually going to be our only one. You might be tempted to say that 4, -3 is a minimum, but our graph doesn't actually get there. So we can't have a minimum at a place we don't get to. Now, the only other thing we need to talk about is absolute max. And this is just the biggest value that we take on. So we have an absolute maximum of 2, and it happens at -4, 2. We have no absolute minimum. Because -2, -2 isn't one, because we do get to -2.5, for instance. But if you look over here, we're getting closer and closer to -3, but we never actually get there. So we have no absolute minimum, but we do have an absolute maximum of 2 that occurs at -4, 2. And we're only going to be asking you to do this kind of analysis on graphs right now. In Calculus 1, you'll learn how to do it when you have an equation. But right now, we're just going to be doing this for looking at graphs.